In the spirit of Halloween, paranormal or not, what is the scariest, creepiest or most unsettling experience of your life? My home was built in 1905. I've never had a paranormal experience, and over the years, I went from eager optimist to hardened skeptic after seeing a few too many awful ghost hunting shows with ridiculous tools that having nothing to do with scientific method. That being said, one night as I was taking a short rest between 8 and 9 p.m. before I went to do more work, my wife opened the door to the bedroom looking a bit pale. Less than 11-year-old is spooked. He was in the bathroom and saw a man's face looking in the window. Naturally thinking it was his imagination, I quizzed him about it, and he seemed very confident what he saw, just for a second, an expressionless man's face, and that it floated up out of frame. The thing is, the window is 5-8 inches off the ground, so for someone to exit heading upwards is impossible, unless they have abnormal height and crouching down. After we got him in bed, windows covered, of course, I said to my wife, it's probably his imagination. Why are you looking spooked? She said just prior to him telling me he saw a face, I saw a face low in our kitchen door window. No one I recognized, just a slightly pale face staring expressionless in for a fraction of a second. She was quite serious. Naturally at this point, I was equal parts creeped out and ready to kick this guy's ass in case there was someone creeping around. We live in a neighborhood detached from other areas of town and only our neighbors ever are walking their dogs around, and typically not at night. We all know each other pretty well, and none of our neighbors are creeps. I took the dog outside to search for clues. The ground was wet and there is dirt where the window is, so if anyone was there, footprints would be visible. No signs of disturbed ground anywhere around the window. Secondly, I work upstairs in my home, and quite often, while I'm the only one home, I'll suddenly hear the sound of my children coming in the house. It's always a nondescript sound of several children's voices talking at once. Naturally I start downstairs to greet them, and no one is there. This happens during the day, and often 2 or 3 times in a day, and a handful of times per year. I've still yet to have a visual experience, but I hope it happens sometime. When I was a kid, the house we rented was a 3-story home and we lived in the 3rd floor apartment. My sister and me shared a bedroom, and I remember one night I woke up feeling extremely cold, but a cold that you feel as if you wouldn't be able to warm up no matter what. Then I felt as if I was being watched, so I look over to the other side of the room where my sister's bed was and she was fast asleep. So at this moment I'm getting scared, so I call out to her, and nothing. And that's when I felt a shift in the bed, so I bolted out of bed and ran across the room to my sister's bed and jumped in and covered myself with the blanket. I was scared to look over to my bed because I had a feeling I would see something. It took me probably a minute but felt like an eternity until I decided to look. So when I pulled the sheets down over my face and looked, as I hoped it was nothing and just my mind playing tricks, that I'd see nothing. But that wasn't the case. As I stared at my bed across the room, there was a mid-aged man in an old-time tuxedo and top hat, pale as can be, laying in my bed staring straight at me. I felt my heart skip a beat as I quickly turned around and hugged my sister and started saying a prayer my mom had taught me. Vish for the life of me I don't remember. I had my eyes closed and I could feel a shift in the room, and I felt as if someone was standing right next to me by the bed as I was on the edge of it. I didn't make a sound as silent tears poured down my face. I didn't want to wake my sister because I was scared something worse would happen, so I just laid there chanting the prayer and hugging my sister under the blankets as I felt that presence next to me. And I kept singing till, without noticing, I fell into a deep sleep, and when I awoke it was morning and the sun was shining. I bolted up and ran to my mother's room crying and sobbing, screaming what had happened, and my mom tried to soothe me saying it was just a dream, but I know it was real. Till this day I will never forget that man in my room. Almost drowning. About 8 years ago this same time of year, I bought a GPS on a whim and wanted to see how it worked, and a few of my buddies had nothing better going on, so they wanted to come. I lived in a small country town with not a lot going for it, so doing random things like this was pretty common. Anyways, all four of us sitting in my friend's driveway deciding where we wanna go. We were used to just driving around and listening to music, so there wasn't a place we could think of we hadn't already been to 100 times, so there was only one option. I randomly touched the screen on a spot not too close, but not too far away from us, and hit the button for the GPS to take us there. I lived in the country, so it was a lot of back roads that I already knew and had been on, but after about 15 minutes of driving and probably 10 turns we were definitely lost, just like we wanted to be. We were cruising along, jamming to some music and bullshitting, and most importantly, getting closer and closer to the blue dot on the screen that we were headed for. We were deep into the woods by this point, in the middle of nowhere, but it wasn't anything we weren't used to. I'm midway through a turn when the GPS finally exclaims, "You are now arriving at your destination." We come all the way through the turn. There stands a dog in the road about 25 yards away, staring right at us. This thing was tall, with a long snout and sleek brown hair that hung to the ground. It looked like almost a sort of show dog. I stop, and my friends and I start freaking out. The dog doesn't move, and never stops staring at us. I finally decide I'm just gonna drive past it. I start driving real slow, never taking my eyes off of it, and it never looking away from me. I pass it and it never stops staring. I couldn't believe how tall it was. If it was closer, it could have put his head right in the window. I haul ass after I pass it and stopped when I could to find out how the hell to get us home. My friends and I still laugh/get freaked out by it when we get together. Not so much scary, but kind of crazy, and something I cannot explain or understand. In high school I had a friend, we'll call him John for these purposes. Me and John played football together, and we would always get extra lifting sessions in at the high school gym. We remained friends after high school and even worked together for a bit. He ended up getting into selling pills, and our relationship deteriorated to the point we were no longer speaking. Fast forward a few years later and I have this dream. In my dream, I am back at my high school gym lifting weights with John. We were just chatting about random stuff, having a good time, and then he suddenly says that he has to go. I tell him I don't want him to leave because I want to keep hanging out and I missed him. He just says he's really sorry but has to leave. I say okay, see you later, and he replies with a nod and a see ya. I woke up to the sound of my phone ringing. I see it is my mom and answer it. She tells me that John had died last night and asking if I am okay and other mom stuff. She had heard from John's mom, who called in saying that John's siblings would not be at school the rest of the week because of his death. My mom was a secretary at the school they went to. I can't help but think that something paranormal had happened to allow me to make peace with and say goodbye to my friend and have some bit of closure. He was 25 when he died of an overdose and was the first person really close to me who died. Edit, it's so interesting to read all these similar experiences. It makes me think there may be something to the idea that when we die we have a chance to, in some way, try to connect with people we care about. I don't know if it is spiritual, psychological, or something else, but it is something I am happy for. Also, minor text fixes, my friend was not fried. Not sure if I'd call it unsettling, but probably the closest to a paranormal experience I've ever had. I lost a close friend rather unexpectedly several years ago. I took it pretty hard, as this friend had helped me through one of the more trying times in my life. Anyway, weeks after he passed I had an extremely vivid dream about him. In the dream I was in a grocery store and he was working there. Slightly weird because to my knowledge, he had never worked in a grocery store, so I'm not sure of the significance. I ran into him in an aisle stocking cans and struck up a rather mundane conversation. Most interestingly, he presented in what I can only describe as a hologram. He didn't look ghostly, but dream me was calmly aware that he wasn't flesh and blood. During this encounter I had this incredible urge to hug him, but even in dream state, I was aware that if I were to make any physical contact with him, he would immediately disappear. Wanting to spend as much time with him as possible, I resisted, though my desire to run over and hug him was almost overwhelming. After a few minutes of chit-chat about nothing in particular, he simply said that he had to get back to work. The dream continued enough for me to exit the store. I woke up crying and haven't had a dream about him since. Walking into the bedroom to see my kid jumping on the bed while she was supposed to be napping. When I asked her what she was doing, she informed me that she was playing with Grandpa. After I ripped the house apart thinking that there was an intruder, I sat down and asked her what Grandpa looked like. She described my grandfather, who died before she was born, to a T. Thinking about it, it made sense because that was such a grandpa thing. She said that she plays with him all the time, but only jumps when he holds her so she doesn't fall and when grandma isn't watching. Also typical grandpa, we got away with murder when grandma wasn't around. While creepy to anyone else, I'm incredibly grateful that even though both of my grandparents are gone, they hang around and protect my kids, none of which they ever met in life. I firmly believe they were with me when my twin sons were born, more than 2 months early, and protected them when doctors said they wouldn't make it.